morning, you've got the Psalm text that says that, that there are two ways to go. There's the path of righteousness, there's the path of the wicked. You got the James text that says that most of us, that if there is wickedness, it's because of the cravings in your heart. And then we see the Mark text where Jesus has to sit down. And when it says that he sat down, what's he doing? Teaching. It's a teaching moment. You guys have got it wrong. Here's what you need to hear. Come and gather around so I can teach you some more. And you're not willing to join in my suffering. You don't want to hear that. You'd rather talk about which among you is the greatest. And it kind of shows us human nature as to the way we are. Sometimes what happens is that the text tells us they were afraid to say anything. They were fearful, and so they didn't ask him what he was talking about. So instead they just changed the subject and moved on and decided to talk about which one of them was the greatest. And we do that a lot too, that we act sometimes out of fear rather than asking the right questions. Maybe would have gone right to the heart of things. We're still talking about the topic of 3 simple rules. Reuben Job's book. Reuben Job wrote this in 2007 based on Wesley's general rules for the church, for his societies, that in 1730 people were asking him. People wanted to know. The people that wanted to be Methodists were asking him, what's the right way to follow Jesus? How do we know if we're doing it right? How do we know that we're on track? It would have been easy in today's age. He could have just opened up the GPS and said, here, follow this line. But in 1730, that's not the way that it was done. So John Wesley thought about it, and come up with the ideas, the general rules of our church. And you know what they are. They're to do no harm, do all the good you can, in all the places that you can, at all the times that you can. Is the longer version of do good. And the last one was attend to the ordinance of God, which we have kind of changed the language a little bit to say, stay in love with God. Find ways amongst what you do, no matter where you are, what you're doing, to find your way to stay in love with God. People that are married or have children or have that special relationship understand what it means to the work that's required to stay in love. It's hard. It's hard. Because love is all those things that Paul said in 1 Corinthians. We remind each other of it each week when I come. That there's no way that you can talk about doing good and staying in love without reminding us that it's not proud or boastful or arrogant or rude, doesn't insist on its own way. All that stuff that love is, that's the way that we have to work at. That's the things that we have to work at so that we do stay in love with whoever it is that we're trying to stay in love with. So John Wesley got 3 simple, the general rules of our church. You can find them in the Book of Discipline, paragraph 105. You look at them and it's basically the same. And so people were asking now, what happens? Nobody's asked me this question yet. I was waiting for somebody to, if we don't follow those rules. Does that mean we're not Methodist? Does that mean we're no longer part of the church? In John Wesley's days, he would say you would have to repent until you figure out ways to do it. Because if you're going to be in this society, if you're going to consider yourself a Methodist, if you're going to gather in particular ways and ask people, how is it with your soul? You better be staying in love with God to have the correct answer. So it was tough. It's tough. It was tough then. It's tough now. These are very difficult rules. I wish you could have been part of the Sunday school discussion that I heard going on this morning while they were there. 6 or 7 people around the table discussing do no harm. That we talked about last week. Do no harm to others. How do we go through and navigate this world saying that we're not going to harm you with what we say? And James last week, the James text said, that your tongue is what's going to get you in trouble. Your tongue will be what is the instrument, the muscle that you have, that is the words that come out of your mouth. Sometimes, what did he say? It was lit by the fire of Gehenna. The fires of hell come out of your mouth. That's how provocative and strong your words can be. This is the Latin for, first, do no harm. And most people think that this is part of the Hippocratic oath, not hypocritic oath. They're so close, you got to watch how you say it. So, Hippocratic oath. And when we talk about that, first do no harm, we think John Wesley probably borrowed the saying from Hippocrates that said that every doctor is going to take an oath that says that I'm not going to hurt anyone. But we know that that's, anybody that's had a shot knows that's not true. Or laser surgery on their eyeball, or whatever it is, you know that it hurts. It hurts. But we do the best that we can, and doctors do the best they can. The only problem is that most of them don't take this oath anymore. And that's not exactly what it says if we go back and read it. So I had a lot of fun on the internet this week and spent a lot of time on websites that probably didn't do me any good, but I learned a lot about the do no harm. It's pretty interesting. But Wesley says that first do no harm, and we talked last week about to do no harm to others, and today we're going to talk about doing no harm to yourself. How is it that we can navigate through this world, do what we have to do, be with those that we have to be, serve on the committee that we have to serve on, and do no harm to ourselves as we go to school, as we wake up in the morning, as we decide what foods we're going to eat, as we decide what exercise we're going to do or not do, as we decide all the things about ourselves, our goals, what we're going to put out there so that this is what I'm going to aspire to, and still do no harm to yourself. This is all based upon when Wesley got it together and decided the general rules of the church, he based it upon the Shema. Deuteronomy 6, 4. And 5. Actually, it goes to 9 for the entire Shema. It says here, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength. And Jesus in Matthew and Luke is quoted says, this is the great commandment. The second is this, to love your neighbor as yourself. And so we've got three entities that we're going to talk about. Last week was love your neighbor, do no harm to others. This week, love yourself. And next week we're going to talk about the ways that we're going to stay in love with God. So how is it? How is it with you? Do you do no harm to yourself? Did you wake up this morning thinking to yourself that you were not going to do that? Regardless of what all happens in this day, I'm not going to hurt myself. Then you walk out and trip over the bedpost and hit your leg or something. I've done that so many times that I don't even notice it anymore. It does hurt. But I do want you to hear the Shema. And if you're Jewish, it's called Shema. Listen to the words. Sing this song in your heart when you get up in the morning.
Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shem Yevon, Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Wear these on your arms. Wear them on your forehead. These ideas of hearing, O Israel. Hear. It's meant to be heard. So this is a prayer that you would say every day as you start your day. This is the first thing that we're going to do no harm to yourself, is to get out of bed and get your right relationship going right off the bat. You're going to say it to yourself. My job today is to love God with all my heart, mind, strength, and soul. And the second is this, to love my neighbor as myself. Now I can go fix my toast and coffee and do all the rest of the stuff that's going to make us good. But we hear it. We hear it. And you should hear that word coming to you every day. Every day it's God reminding us that God is God, we are not, and we're to love Him with everything that we have. And if we get that right, then the rest of this stuff about doing no harm is going to start to make more sense. We get back to the table that we listened to, the ideas passed around, and you could tell nobody was in full agreement with the person sitting next to him. We're all Methodists sitting back there, or so I think. But political differences are coming into, because we talked about all the issues. I heard the issue of abortion. I heard the issue of politics and who is the best candidate. Get involved in that conversation and not do any harm. Either to your neighbor or to yourself. Do you see where it starts to get complicated and very complex? It takes more than just saying, I'm going to try to not do that. It requires a conscious choice that you make as to which path you're going to follow. And the Psalm says that if those that are righteous are follow the one path, not like the wicked, and their leaves don't fall off. The reason their leaves don't fall off is because their roots go deep. Their roots go deep. They're grounded. All these texts today go to the groundedness into God. Groundedness into the Scripture. Groundedness into knowing who you're attached to and what you're attached to and what you're not. These are important issues and decisions that you make as we go through the day, and it doesn't matter whether you're 2 or whether you're 100, because it makes a difference as to how we interact and react with each other and with God. And you can't escape any of that during the day. You're just going to have to. Some of the ways, so we start thinking about, last week as we were past that about, we know about our tongue and how we talk to other people. We have said we're going to fix that, right? We are going to try? Come on now, help me out a little bit. We're going to try, right? All right, we are going to try. We're going to try to stay in love. We're going to try to do no harm by watching the words that we say. But how are we going to do number 2 and do no harm to ourselves? John Wesley had an idea about what it meant, and what he said was, avoid all sorts of evil. Avoid all sorts of evil. And for him, he knew what that meant for him, because he struggled with the idea of alcoholism and drinking. He said that for me, to avoid evil, then I have to stay away from that. He particularly didn't like gin. No, I think he really liked gin, but I think he particularly struggled with that. So he stayed away from it. Brawling, fighting, arguing, that was another one that he stayed away from. The extraction of interest on things that he loaned, usury. He said that was bad. And so we get a whole bunch of things that were contextual, that were culturally contextual back in the early 1700s. But what about today? What about the things, well, if John Wesley was creating a list, if he was living today, what would it look like today? What are the things that we struggle with today that we may need to avoid for whatever reason? Sometimes it's the websites we go to. Maybe we ought to clean those up a little bit. Sometimes it's that which we watch on TV. Sometimes it's the people that we associate with that really aren't doing us any good, that are bringing us down. We never know who that is, because every person in here, just like that round table discussion, what does harm to you may not do harm to me. So we have to start thinking about that. You can go crazy if you look and say, if you're looking for the ways that we harm each other, or that you harm yourself. You have to ask what it is. What are you looking for? What are the ways that you harm yourself? You need to write these down and to think about them. How do I hurt myself? And it's not necessarily the physical hurt. In fact, it's not the physical hurt at all. Some of the things that we find ourselves that get in the way of or doing no harm. I asked Kathy Winstanley this week to talk to me about Stephen's Ministers and some of the things that they get involved in. I said, I don't want to know about anything in specific. But she said, you'd be surprised. One of the things that people do that hurt themselves is they don't get the help that they need when they need it. They don't come and they wait and just keep following this road or pounding that thing the same way and getting the same results, and they're needing somebody to come alongside them, but they don't ask. They don't ask. That may be you. That may be me. That's just one thing. The other thing that we do, and this can be a double-edged sword too, it's lowering our expectations for ourselves. Now, that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes we set them too high to begin with. Our bar is too high. Nobody can reach that. And we have that not just for ourselves, but for other people. But sometimes we don't live into that which we expect for ourselves because it's too difficult, because the road that we go isn't as smooth as what it could be. And so we change our expectations for ourselves and what we do. There's the other one that we do. Sometimes we're an enabler. That out of the goodness of our heart, and I know who you are, because there's a bunch of you out here that can't say no. There's a number that can't say yes, but there's a bunch more that can't say no, that just that allows themselves to get in situations that they go home after they've had their conversation, they go home and they put their hands in their head and they say, why did I agree to do that? The people that are laughing have been there, that's for sure. I know that. The failure to recognize the time when we need help, that's what Kathy was talking about, that we let ourselves go for too long before we ask for the person to help. That's one of the worst ways that we hurt ourselves. And we try to travel this alone, and if it's one thing that I know is that you can't do this by yourself. You cannot do this by yourself. You need somebody to come alongside you to help you. You have to have that person. Has to be somebody. And as like this one here, you failed to ask the right question and you reacted out of fear or knowledge. That goes right to the Mark text this morning. The disciples, after Jesus tells them, I need you to join in my suffering. I'm going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to need you to be there for me. And by the time they finish the walk, Jesus already knows what happened. Out of fear, because they were afraid, they didn't ask the right questions. Of all the things they might have asked, what do you need me to do? How can I help you? What else is going on? Is there something I can do? Instead they say, they were talking about who can be the greatest. Failure to ask the right question that can be one of the worst ways that we hurt ourselves is because we think we know the answer that we don't. You know the story about Grandpa that was fixing oatmeal, and Mom dropped off. He was going to babysit the kid, his grandson, dropped the grandson off. So he finishes making the oatmeal, and as he's making it, he said, do you like raisins? Yep. You like brown sugar? Yep, love brown sugar. You like butter? Yeah, the more the better. So he fixes the bowl of oatmeal and pushes it in front of him, and the kid pushes it all the way. I hate oatmeal. You didn't ask the right question. We get in trouble that way sometimes. Sometimes that we, in our thoughts, that we're so much ahead of the game and get too busy, whatever it is, but we don't ask the right question. And when we, and it can go, and it can be one of the worst ways that we hurt ourselves. The reason we can't get too specific about where I said the reason that we hurt ourselves this way, because like I said at the beginning, it depends on who you are, where you've been, what your temperament is, what your status is, all the things that make us who we are. My hurt is not your hurt. We do know that we spend a great deal of time doing damage to ourselves. I bet you that if you were to do this, if you were to put a rubber band on your wrist, and every time you did something that you said, why did I do that? Or I think I just hurt myself. If you just pulled that rubber band back and snapped it, you'd have a sore wrist at the end of the day. I know you would. And the last thing that we do, and this is probably one of the greatest disservices that we do to ourselves, is that we measure our self-esteem by stuff. We measure self-esteem by a worldly standard. And we know that this is true, that the worldly standard is achievement is short-lived and never satisfied. But yet our sense of worth that protects us from being hurt seems to be measured a lot on our families. Oh, we got perfect families. Surely we can't have any of them that's not exactly correct. That's hurtful to you. If you think that way, you're going to be disappointed a lot. How about our status, the car we drive, all the rest of the stuff that goes with that? What our 401k looks like, retirement. If we base our self-worth on that, then grab the rubber band and pull it way out there. Because that one's really going to hurt you. The message for today is fairly simple. That John Wesley, the three simple rules that we get in there, and we do not hurt ourselves or try not to hurt others. And next week we're going to talk about how we find ways not to hurt God, if that's possible. But we will talk about that because I think that what we're going to see is the hurt that we do to ourselves is hurtful to God. And that's what we will discover. As we look at these things, the general rules of the church, how do we stay in love with God, what our worship looks like. It's going to change the way that we look at each other. It's going to change the way that when we stand in the bathroom in the morning and look in the mirror, it should change the way you see yourself. It should change the way that you sit at a discussion table like Sunday school. And I hope everybody comes back and joins us next week because the discussion, we need your input. We really do. It's a great topic. But it's going to change the way that we, instead of saying, as soon as that person, that finishes what they're saying, we can't wait to be right back in their face because we think they're wrong. Well, actually, we know they're wrong. And we can't wait to tell you that you're wrong. But it may change the way that we do that. It may change our dialogue. And if we do that, if we change our dialogue, then maybe we'll become more loving and not insisting on our own way, boastful, proud, arrogant, rude, and all the rest of the stuff that love is not. And so if we start to think about doing everything we do based upon love, it opens up a world of possibilities for our families, for our spouses, for our children, the person sitting next to you, and for the people in this community. If we start basing what we do based upon such rules that are so easy and so difficult to do. Open up your minds, open up your hearts, and open them up to God. Thanks be to God.
Amen.